after 38 years of fixing other people's mistakes as a civil engineer. Henry Cole wanted silence more than anything else. No traffic, no clients, no phone calls, just the whisper of wind and pine. So, when his final paycheck cleared, he sold his Denver townhouse and bought a small cabin on the edge of Windfall Ridge, Wyoming. He imagined it as a second chance. Mornings with coffee and sunlight through tall trees. Nights with books and quiet fires. The realtor handed him the keys, smiling like she was passing him freedom itself. Henry thanked her and drove north, the road narrowing with every mile until the last bar of cell signal vanished. It felt right when he reached the cabin, outgrazed near the porch, as if welcoming him. He stood there for a while, breathing the cold air, and whispered, finally. Inside, everything smelled of cedar and smoke. One room, one bedroom. One life he could finally call his own. That night, he called his daughter Laura to tell her he'd arrived safely. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said. You deserve peace after all these years. He smiled, unaware that peace had a short lifespan. 3 days later, his phone rang again. Mark, his son-in-law, the kind of man who measured respect in dollars, didn't waste time with greetings. Dad, listen, he said. My parents just lost their house. They'll be moving in with you for a while. It's temporary. Henry froze. Mark? This cabin's barely big enough for one person. You'll manage. They'll be there Friday. If it's a problem, maybe you shouldn't have retired so far from family. Then came the click and silence. Henry stared at the phone, his fingers trembling slightly. The man who'd built bridges across rivers suddenly realized he'd built none in his own family. That night, sleep didn't come. Only the wind outside, scraping branches across the roof like warnings stopped by morning. His mind was clear, colder, sharper than it had been in years. He poured himself black coffee and whispered, if they're moving into my peace, they should know what peace costs. That morning, Henry didn't unpack more boxes. He opened an old engineering notebook instead and started designing something far more complex than bridges. Something called revenge with structure. Asterisk. Henry had spent a lifetime building structures that could outlast storms. Now, sitting at his wooden kitchen table, he began sketching something new, not of steel or concrete, but of strategy. Each line he drew wasn't a beam or a wall. It was a plan. He titled the page quietly, Stability Under Pressure. He started with information. Every good engineer knew if you understand the forces at play, you can control the outcome. So he drove to Windfall County's ranger station, pretending to be just another nervous city retired. He asked questions about local wildlife, especially wolves. The ranger, a weathered man with sunburned cheeks, was happy to share. They usually keep to themselves, the ranger said, tapping a map with his pen. But they'll come close if they smell food. Fresh meat, especially. Henry nodded thoughtfully. That's good to know. I'd hate for visitors to feel unsafe. Back in town, he stopped by a hardware store and bought 2 motion-activated wildlife cameras, claiming he wanted to study elk. He paid in cash. At the butcher's, he requested 15 pounds of beef scraps for my dog, he explained. He didn't own one. When he returned to the cabin, the forest greeted him like an accomplice. He worked with quiet precision, installing cameras near the driveway and porch. Then, just before dusk, he walked 50 yards from the cabin and placed the meat on the ground in careful piles, downwind, so the scent would travel through the pines. Not enough to lure danger too close, but enough to make his point. He wasn't planning harm. He was planning perspective. When Friday came, Mark's parents arrived, Harold and Edna, carrying judgment heavier than their suitcases. Well, Edna said, stepping out of the car, this isn't what I pictured. Smells wild. Henry smiled politely. It's nature's perfume. They complained through the afternoon, no signal, no TV, too many bugs. Then came the howls, distant, echoing through the timber. Edna froze, eyes wide. Was that? Wolves? Henry said calmly, sipping his tea on the porch. They're territorial this time of year. Don't worry, they usually keep their distance, unless someone leaves food out. Minutes later, Another howl, closer this time. Edna clutched her husband's arm. Harold, get the keys. By the time the headlights disappeared down the dirt road, Henry was still on the porch, the cup empty in his hand, the smallest smile on his lips. The forest returned to silence. That night, Henry deleted the camera footage, except one clip. The one he knew Mark would soon need to see. Because this wasn't about fear anymore. It was about control. Asterisk, 3 days passed before the call came. Dad, Mark's voice cracked through the line, sharp and furious. What the hell did you do? My parents said they were attacked by wolves at your place. Henry exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting toward the mist sliding through the pines. Attacked? He said mildly. No one was hurt, were they? They could have been. You set them up. Henry let a faint chuckle escape. Mark, you told me they'd be safe here. I didn't plan the wilderness, I just moved into it. He ended the call with deliberate calm. Then he forwarded the video clip from his security camera, the one showing wolves appearing. His guests running for the car, unharmed but terrified. The message attached was simple: next time ask before sending people into someone else's home. The reply never came. For a while, things went quiet. Then whispers began. Cousins, distant relatives, even his daughter Laura calling with concern. Dad, Mark says you're not. Well, she began hesitantly, that you're acting strange, isolating yourself. Henry smiled faintly. The oldest trick in the book, make the sane man look unstable. I'm fine, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm just learning how quiet feels when no one's trying to control it. When the call ended, he realized peace wasn't the prize. It was the weapon. He began documenting everything. Texts, calls, property deeds, financial records, every whisper of manipulation recorded with engineer-level precision. Weeks later, he drove into Cody, parked across from a law office, and met attorney Evelyn Shaw, a sharp, grounded woman who listened more than she spoke. After he laid out every detail, from the forced cohabitation to the Wolf incident, she leaned back in her chair and said, They're not after reconciliation, Mr. Cole. They're after control of your assets. Henry nodded. Then, I want to make sure they can never touch what I've built. Evelyn outlined a plan. A revocable living trust. All property. All savings transferred under legal protection. If anyone tries to question your mental stability, she added, we'll have medical proof ready. Let's make sure the next time they come for your peace, they find steel walls instead of open doors. Henry agreed. Every form, every signature felt like placing a brick in a fortress. By the end of the week, his name was no longer directly tied to his property. His cabin, his sanctuary, belonged only to the trust. He sat on his porch that evening, a single lantern burning beside him, and whispered, You wanted my house. Mark, now even I don't own it, but you'll never touch it. But control breeds desperation, and desperate men don't play fair. Henry's peace was about to be tested in ways even he hadn't engineered. Asterisk. Henry's life returned to its rhythm. Early mornings, black coffee, slow walks through the pines. But peace built on strategy always carries an echo of tension. He could feel it coming, like thunder muffled behind the mountains. It arrived one Wednesday afternoon. A dark sedan pulled into his driveway, tires crunching the gravel. A woman stepped out, official folder in hand. Mr. Cole, she asked. I'm Margaret Willis, with Adult Protective Services. We received a welfare complaint about you. Henry felt the calm in his chest harden into iron. Of course, he said. Please, come in. She walked through the cabin, noting everything, clean counters, neatly arranged bills, stocked fridge. The complaint mentioned you're living in unsafe conditions, she said gently. That you've shown signs of confusion, Henry smiled thinly. I see. And I suppose my son-in-law was just concerned, wasn't he? I can't disclose who. You don't have to. He reached into his folder and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a recent medical evaluation from his physician, confirming perfect cognitive health. Beneath it, a copy of his newly established trust, signed and notarized. Margaret read in silence. eyebrows lifting slightly. You seem exceptionally prepared, Mr. Cole. 40 years of engineering. Ms. Willis, I learned to reinforce foundations before the storm hits. When she left, the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. Within a week, the case was closed. The report stated clearly, subject competent, self-sufficient, and in no danger. Complaint unfounded. Henry placed the file on his shelf, labeling it carefully. False allegations. Closed. One more brick in his fortress. But the real collapse began miles away. Evelyn called a few days later. Henry, I found something. Mark's parents are using your address on federal forms. Benefits paperwork, credit union accounts, even a social security update. Henry's grip on the phone tightened. They're committing fraud using my property. Yes, and that's a federal crime. That night, under the glow of his desk lamp, Henry opened his field notebook, the same one that once held blueprints and equations. Now it held truth. Each page recorded their deception, screenshots, letters, postmarks. Evidence layered like steel dot. By dawn, he was ready. He called Evelyn. Report it. Every single detail. Let the law handle what I no longer need to dirty my hands with. Are you sure? She asked. I'm done worrying them, he said quietly. It's time they learned what consequences sound like. He looked out the window at the first light crawling through the forest, calm, unbothered, resolute. What began as a battle for Solitude was about to end in a courtroom, and the only thing more powerful than Henry's revenge was his proof. Asterisk, asterisk, summer melted into September. And with it came the day of reckoning. Henry sat outside his cabin, mug in hand, as the morning mist thinned across the valley. A call from Evelyn broke the quiet. It's done, she said. Federal investigators have acted on your report. Mark's parents were charged with mail and benefits fraud. Henry didn't smile. Not really. He just exhaled, slow and steady, as if setting down a weight he'd carried too long. What about Mark? He asked. He's drowning. Missed mortgage payments, debts, and now panic. He's trying to sell his house to cover legal fees. But he can't because the loan was bought, Henry finished softly. By our trust. Silence hummed between them, professional, respectful. You understand, Evelyn said carefully. You hold his future in your hands now. I never wanted his future, Henry replied. Only my peace. That peace was almost within reach. 2 days later, his daughter, Laura, arrived. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. Dad, Mark told me you ruined him. No, Henry said, guiding her inside. He ruined himself. I just stopped building bridges that only led back to fire. She didn't speak again until he showed her the documents, the proof of fraud, the lies, the trust papers protecting what he'd built. She read every word, her expression shifting from disbelief to heartbreak. When she finally looked up, tears had welled in her eyes. He lied to me about everything, she whispered. He did, Henry said. But now you know the truth. And the truth is freedom. In the weeks that followed, the law did what it was meant to do. Mark's parents pleaded guilty. Mark himself signed divorce papers, cornered not by rage, but by evidence. Laura kept her name, her dignity, and eventually her peace. When it was over, Henry didn't celebrate. He rebuilt. He helped Laura move into a small cottage on the outskirts of Cody, close enough for dinner on Sundays, far enough for her to breathe. They painted the walls, unpacked books, and for the first time in months, laughter returned between them. One evening, she joined him on the porch of the cabin that had started it all. Do you think I'll ever trust again? She asked quietly. Henry watched the elk, grazing beyond the clearing. Yes, he said. But next time, you'll build stronger foundations. The sunset deepened, painting gold across the timber. For the first time, the silence around him wasn't lonely, it was earned. He leaned back in his rocking chair, eyes half closed, whispering to himself. Revenge wasn't the goal. Stability was. And for once, the engineer in him knew the structure would hold. Sometimes vengeance isn't loud. It's precise, deliberate, and silent enough to echo forever.